Well, welcome to Lake Bethel. It's good to see all of you here today. This is the first day of going back to two services. We have two services, one at 9 and one at 11, and we, of course, invite all of you to be there at both of those. My name is Sherwin, and I'm the pastor here at Lake Bethel. So, folks, I know a little bit about chickens. Not a lot, but I have lots of memories of chickens, because when I was a little kid, we had a chicken house that had 300 laying hens in it and 25 roosters, because my dad believed that, this was a common belief at that time, that if you had roosters in with the hens, they would lay more eggs. Now that since has been disproven, but at the time that was popular. Now the chicken facility that we had kind of looked like this. I don't have a picture of it, but it was just a beat up old shed where we had those 300 chickens in. And the inside looked somewhat like this, with rows of the nests where the chickens would go in and lay their eggs. It was, I guess you'd call it free range chickens before there was such a thing. And we had nests like this too, and those top nests, I had to start helping my mom when I was already in second grade. She'd take me in there, and I had to stand on a 5-gallon bucket to get the eggs out of the top nests. And it was a common thing. We had this basket, we'd take them in, and then as I got older, I would do it by myself. But you know, a rooster is a terribly intimidating creature to a second grader. You know, when they get up and they make their noise, scared me to death. And you know, they have a definite pecking order. That's not a myth that somebody comes up with. They do come after you. The 25 roosters that we would have in there, the alpha rooster would get very protective. And when you're a little kid, that thing squares off on you, you get scared. But on an Iowa farm, it's not cool to be scared. You have to hide it, or people will make fun of you for the next 50 years. So you can't show any fear, but I was scared to death of that thing. What I learned about roosters is they don't just crow at dawn. That's another myth. They crow all the time. They crow if you walk past the chicken coop. They crow if a dog would come near the chicken coop, and we raised dogs at the same time. So anytime a dog would come around, the hens would cackle and the roosters would crow. It was kind of an interesting thing. But like dogs, they would crow any time of the day. My grandfather, who spoke Dutch a lot, said that the roosters are barking again. And that is what it sounded like. Now in second grade, I would go in there and these roosters would come after me. You know, they'd peck at your legs, and they would rear up and try to claw you with those claws. I hated those stupid chickens. And I feared the roosters. Now, they were kind of interesting, but it gave me this theory that the only good chicken is a fried chicken. All right? But these roosters were a test for me when I was a kid. My dad said, you have to find a way for these roosters to be afraid of you rather than you be afraid of them. And I did figure that out after a while. But I found that when I tell city folks how I did that, they get quite offended, so I'm just not going to tell you my technique. But it worked very well, and the roosters were afraid of me after a while. But it was a test. It was a test for me to figure out how to work around these roosters. Today, our theme is much of life, much of what happens to us in this life is a test. Life is always a test. We learned today that Satan actually asked permission to test us. He's probably asking permission, or his underlings are asking permission to test you right now. And for whatever reason, God lets him do it. In the passage we're about to look at, it says, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat. And what that would have looked like to the people of Jesus' day is what this picture illustrates. They took the wheat that was gathered in bundles, they stuck a fork into it, threw it up in the air on a breezy day, so the wind would come along and take the chaff off and some other undesirable things. It was being sifted. It removes some of the bad stuff. But the fact is that we all get sifted. Any of us who lives in this world, who have lived a while, know that you're going to get sifted. And what this passage teaches us is let's not waste a good sifting. Now, my worst sifting was probably in the 80s when I went through a divorce, or recently when we had to deal with cancer. Those are times of sifting. Running a church during a pandemic is a time of sifting too. But what will happen is I'll waste those experiences if I don't use them to help others, if I don't use them to strengthen others after they're over. So let's look at this most interesting passage from Luke chapter 22. And I invite you to listen for the word of the Lord to you as we read it. But this is from Luke chapter 22. And Jesus addresses Peter first by his Hebrew name, which was Simon, and then later by his Greek name, which was Peter. So here's how the passage reads. Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift each of you like wheat. But I have pleaded in prayer for you, Simon, that your faith should not fail. So when you have repented and turned to me again, strengthen your brothers. See, now this sifting means to separate, to make the chaff leave the wheat. It's a time of testing. And from this strange passage, we can gather that Satan wants permission to test us. And sometimes he gets it. He and his army of demons are ready to test us. Now, why does God allow this? And I don't have an answer for that. God's plan is greater than anything I can wrap my mind around. So I have to trust him because I can't understand it. But what this passage tells us, it's both good news and bad news. The bad news is we're going to get sifted, and the good news is we can get through it. And that's a good thing, because Jesus pleads for us just like he pleads for Peter in this passage. That's good news. Satan may be planning on sifting you right now. Who knows what that sifting is going to show up as? But it may be a plan. The question is, will your faith survive? And Jesus believes it will. And that when you've repented, if you fall away, when you've repented, strengthen your brothers and sisters when you get through it. Use it to strengthen someone else. Now, when Jesus said this, Peter got a little bit feisty, and as he was prone to do, and it reads like this. Peter said, Lord, I'm ready to go to prison with you and even to die with you. He was pretty confident in himself. But Jesus said, Peter, let me tell you something. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. Peter had some humble pie to eat there. In the Greek, the rooster doesn't crow, the rooster cries in Greek. In Dutch, the roosters bark. But that's what Jesus said, that before this rooster crows tomorrow morning, you're going to deny that you even know me 3 times. So we're going to skip a few paragraphs in the passage now and jump down to verse 54, where Jesus is arrested. It says this, so they arrested him and led him to the high priest's home. And Peter followed at a distance. The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. A servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. Finally, she said, this man was one of Jesus' followers. But Peter denied it. Woman, he said, I don't even know him. After a while, someone else looked at him and said, you must be one of them. No, man, I'm not, Peter retorted. About an hour later, someone else insisted, this must be one of them because he is a Galilean too. But Peter said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. And Peter left the courtyard, weeping bitterly. See, he knew his faith had faltered. He showed remorse. And we'll get the rest of the story next Sunday. But Peter was sifted. He was tested. He failed. And he came back. We are all going to be sifted because we live in a war zone. What do you suppose your next test is going to be? Something that depletes you, tempts you to become an angry pessimist, makes you despair of life. It might be health, it might be relationships, who knows what it is. What Jesus is teaching us here is to use that sifting. And while you're being sifted, don't beat yourself up. There's no need for that. It's always the hardest person to forgive is the one you look at in the mirror usually. You have to forgive yourself for it. And when others are being sifted, help them. Don't judge them. Use your experience to comfort and strengthen them. Why do we have to be sifted? I'm not sure. But it happens. And when it happens, you'll get through it. Eventually, the rooster barks, and it's over. That's the time to turn back to God and help someone else who is being tested. That's what we're called to do. And as always, thanks for listening.